I'm pleased to meet you again in our ninth lecture, and that will be our first, second genre, which is fiction, in which we will discuss two pieces of literature or two pieces of fiction. The first one is a short story, a very famous and beautiful, interesting short story by Kate Chopin, and a famous American female story writer. There is a short, biography about her on page, let's say, this could be page 8 or 7, slide 7. Kate Chopin, born 1851, died 1904, and she is known as one of the best, and most famous, short story writers. She wrote more than 100, short stories and a novel called The Awakening. She's always, her frequent or recurring themes, the themes that she usually wrote about, was, the problem of women, or the problems, facing women, in the Middle Age or in early 19th century, about the repression and depression of women, and their rank and their problems in the society, and fighting for the rights of the woman, in the early 19th century, and her works remain popular and famous. So our first story, our first piece of fiction, in the second genre, the short story, it is called The Story of an Hour. The Story of an Hour by Kate Chopin. It's, as I've just said, a famous and interesting story. But before we start discussing the story, we need to discuss literary terms that are very much related to the genre of fiction. Okay, as we did first, we discussed certain literary terms that are related more to poetry. Here we discuss some other, literary forms that are more related to fiction. So remember that there are some, terms, okay, some literary terms are, used in, let's say, the 3 or 4 genres of literature. So we need to know all of these together by the end of the semester to discuss any piece or to analyze any piece of literature. And regarding, fiction, we are more concerned about, first of all, character, because it's a basic element in any piece of fiction to know about the characters, and one of the major elements of making a story is the character, or characters. Character is a person, involved in the actions, or referred to in the actions of a story. Okay, so it's so, and we know about these characters through the dialogues between them, the characters, or by the dialogues, referring to other characters, who are not involved in the dialogue. So a person in a drama or narrative, through verbal representation or action, it is through their dialogues of the characters, and actions that we know about and understand about these characters. So characters, when we talk about characters or a character, it's not just those who act and involved actually in the events or in the actions. We also include, in this element, any character who's being referred to, okay, by other characters. Okay, characters can be of different types. It's not here mentioned, but you have to know that we have at least, let's say, talk about 2 types of characters. Let's say what is called the round characters, okay, and the static characters. Round characters, we talk about characters, of different sides, and characters, who are developing characters, we also call them. The developing characters, the characters that change all through the course of the story. Yani, they start of being something, and then they develop, and then they end up being something else different. They become, more mature. They start, say, as naive people, not knowledgeable. Then they develop, and then they become mature people and more knowledgeable and more developed. Okay, these are the developing characters, or the dynamic, let's say, dynamic characters. Then we have what is called static characters. Static characters, those characters who do not change all through the course of the story, and they remain the same. There are some characters who do not change at all from the beginning to the end of the story, like, let's say, the parents of the heroes, the mother and the father, or the grandmothers and the grandfather, or say about drivers, or characters who act as drivers in a story, or waiters or waitresses in a story. They do not usually servants. These are called static characters because they start and end the way they are. They do not change. Okay. These are what we call static characters. So we have dynamic characters, characters who change all through the course of the story, and then we have static characters, static, those who do not change. So the dynamic is the changing character. The static is the unchanging character who doesn't change. Foreshadowing is another figure of speech, or an element of stories. It's a statement, or statements that used in literature to give hints about what is going to happen, to suggest, to give clues to what is coming in the future of the events of the story. So it's the use of hints or clues to suggest what will happen later in literature. Okay, foreshadowing is a tool used to give a reader or audience a hint of what may happen later. Okay, oxymoron is a figure of speech used in literature in general, in poetry and in story, and it's a device when you use two contradictory words, okay, two opposing words together. Okay, each other in meaning are used together to form a paradox. Okay, like putting two contradictory words together. This is what meant by oxymoron. Oxymoron, putting two contradictory words together. Here we have example: hot ice, okay, cold fire, wise fool, sad joy. اوكي نقول مثلا زي ما نقول في العربي نقول يعني نقول ان نار جنه. اوكي حامض حلو، او يعني خلينا نقول مثلا سكون العاصفه. اوكي او نقول مثلا say سمعني صوت سكوتك. اوكي to putting two contradictory words, okay, together, of course, to have a meaning, to imply something. Okay, plot, the effect of اللي هو ايش العقدة او الحبكة, the effect of the structure and relationship of the actions, events and characters in a fictional work. This is the plot. The plot اللي هو also we call it the arrangement of the the sequence arrangement of the actions of the story. Okay, the sequence arrangement of the actions of the story. Okay, the arrangement of the actions of the story. Plot. Okay, يعني how the actions of the story put in the order the writer يعني wants it to be. A plot depends on conflict. Conflict is something you should know also. It's not here, but should be mentioned. Okay, So you have to remember this. Although it's not mentioned, okay, we may add it later, but it's something you need to know. The conflict, because there is no story without a conflict. Conflict هو صراع, and it's in English it's called the struggle. There is no story without a conflict, and the conflict is the struggle between two things, two powers, two objects. Okay, it can be a struggle. The conflict can be a struggle between a man and a man against a man against a woman, a man against himself, inside himself. Okay, psychological يعني conflict. You know, can be a man against the nature, a man against the society, a man against the traditions. Okay, these are different kinds of conflicts, and you know the conflict, you know, leads to the plot, okay, of the story, and the plot of the story here is the arrangement, okay, of the actions of the story, and usually, you know, there is a structure of the plot, what is called the plot structure. Okay, plot structure, remember this word. The plot structure, also not mentioned here, is a structure that is, you know, that arranges the events of the story, the actions of the story, and it is composed of 5 parts. اللي هم ايش؟ الانترودكشن, okay, the beginning of the story يعني, then the rising actions, then at the top زي الهرم, okay, زي القوس, at the top of the arch, at the top of the pyramid, في أعلى الهرم, بعد rising action number 3 اللي بيسموها الكلايمكس, العقدة اللي هو the peak of the actions, okay, the most complicated part of the story اللي هي الحبكة أو قمة العقدة أو التعقيد في الأحداث, okay, the top, the peak of the actions of the story. After that we come to 3 اللي هو falling actions بنسميهم, falling actions, that is number 4. Then we come to the end of the story اللي هو resolution or denouement أو اللي هو the end of the story. Then these are the 5 parts of the plot structure. Again, plot structure is composed of 5 parts اللي هم ايش؟ beginning, introduction of the story, rising action, climax, then falling action, then اللي هو resolution أو end of the story أو result, okay, end of the story, resolution أو denouement يسموه. Okay, this is the plot of the story. Okay, after the plot, okay, we have the point of view. The point of view, of course, is another important element in making a story. اللي هو إيش? What is meant by point of view? We mean here the narrator of the story. يعني how is the story narrated? Through which eye point of view? And point of view here we mean either اللي هو I point of view أو he point of view. يعني first person point of view أو third person point of view. I point of view اللي هو first person يعني I we. If the story starts telling يعني if it is told through the I, يقول I was, I go, I. Okay, this is what is called first person point of view. If the story is told from the third person point of view, we say he. So someone is telling us a story about someone else. He, so and so, he, they. Okay, and here he is not participant, is not part of the actions. Someone is telling us what is happening. Like in the first person اللي هو I point of view is a participant point of view. Participant narrator. يعني الناريتر اللي هو I is what is part of the actions. يعني he participates in the actions of the story because he is one of the actors, one of the characters of the story. That is the I point of view. طبعا we have also different kinds of points of view. We have, you know, either I or third person point of view. Either it is omniscient or non-omniscient. Omniscient يعني يعلم كل شيء, عليم بكل شيء. Okay, I point of view, omniscient I point of view يعني ايش? When the narrator knows about what goes inside the characters. He knows about their dreams, thoughts, feelings, about what's going inside their hearts. That's omniscient. It can be omniscient, يعني wholly omniscient أو partly omniscient. Okay? يختار يكون هذا الناريتر إما يكون يعلم كل شيء عن كل الشخصيات أو يعلم عن فقط بعض الشخصيات وبالذات اللي هو إيش الشخصيات الرئيسية. And هون إيش partly omniscient. He knows just about one major character and what goes inside this character, but he doesn't know, or the narrator doesn't know about the other characters. Okay, and partly non-omniscient. Okay, when the narrator is objective, يعني he just tells what is happening. He just, the narrator tells what is happening without commenting and without going inside the feeling and the dreams, the thoughts of the characters. He just, talks about what is happening only. يعني the point of view, let's say in general, it just acts like a camera. Okay, tells what is going on, and this camera decides what you can see. Okay, if it's an omniscient point of view, so the camera takes you inside the minds, the thoughts, their hearts, the feelings of the characters. If the narrator is not omniscient, so the camera just stays from outside. Okay, just telling you what you see from outside only, not inside. So a point of view is a narrative method which determines the manner in which the position from where a story is told. Okay. The point of view is perspective. في عنا first person اللي هو I or you, و third person he, she, it أو they. Second person you طبعا is rarely used. Okay, it's not very common, so we don't need to worry about. So we only worry about, or we just remember اللي هو two main points of view اللي هو first person I والوي يعني, و third person اللي هو he, she, it وتجمعهم طبعا they. A third point of view طبعا we'll have examples of the two points of view. The first person like the Telltale Heart, with third person like the story of an hour, our first story. The third person point of view, though first person can be powerful, third person is actually more versatile point of view. Third person allows you to create a much richer, more complicated universe, not like the first person. Okay, because you are told يعني what is exactly happening and what you need to think about. But with the third person you can يعني create much richer universe about the characters and the actions. Setting is another element of a story. اللي هو ايش setting? When we talk about setting, we talk about the place, the time, اللي هو and the social atmosphere, the weather condition of the story. يعني when and where the story or the actions of the story take place. The setting, including the social background, the general atmosphere of the story, the weather conditions. Setting is determining time and place in fiction. Okay. Setting كمان ايش refers to time, place, and social circumstances in which a literary work occurs. Okay. يعني how a character wears, how he speaks. Okay, that's part of the setting, because the way a character talks or dresses tells about his or her background, his social background. So that's part of the setting. Okay, these are the most important points about the literary, or the most important literary terms we need to remember for as an while discussing our first story. Then here we come to our first story, and we just it's already discussed for you and explained, so please you need to read, but I'll just skim it with you here, just telling you a little bit about this story. It's a beautiful story. It's a story about a young married woman suffers from a heart condition. She's a bit she's depressed by her marriage. She's not happy with her husband, not that happy with her husband, and she receives news about the death of her husband in a train accident, and she after hearing the news of the death of her husband, she goes up to her room. She locks herself inside the room, and she sits in front of an open window, and she expresses her inside feelings about what she'll experience from today on, and how her future will be after the death of her husband. So she looks through an open window, looking out, watching the birds, the trees, the greenery, the beautiful scenery, sort of a spring, life outside the window with little patches of dark, clouds. And she inside herself, she says, or she screams, silently, free, free, free. So she felt that she feels that she has freedom after the death of her husband. But then later on, we know that it was her husband. Her husband, did not die in that train accident. It was just a piece of news reported by mistake. But her husband was away from the location or the site of the train accident, and then he returns to the house, and then they think her sister, the wife, Mrs. Mullard, and her sister, and the friend of her husband, they think that if they tell her about the return of her husband, she will be very happy. So her sister goes up to her room, calling her to come down, to see her husband coming back, because and they tell her to tell the wife, the sister, gently about the return of her husband. They did not want her to suffer, because she has a heart problem. Anyway, she comes out of her the wife comes out of her room, going downstairs, and then she sees her husband and falls down, and she dies. And then the physicians came, the doctors came, and they think, and this is where the story ends. The doctors, because they know that she has a heart problem, they think that she was killed and she died because of joy, because of the joy of pleasure, being so happy because of the return of her husband. And this is ironic. Okay, زي ما نقول ومن الحب ما قتل, ولكن هو ايش? In fact, she did not die because of the return of her husband, safe. No, in fact, this depends on you and on your interpretation to the end of the story. Okay, it's possibly she died because of the return of her husband, because now she thinks that she'll go back to her old life, and now her husband has come back now, so her life will be again, let's say, depressed, oppressed, and she will not be happy as she thought, and she will not be free as she thought she would be. Okay, and that is the story of an hour. Okay. the story of an hour, publication. See, there is what is called, about this short story, the unities of the story. Yani has, it's well done, and it applies, observes the unity of the story, the unity of place, time, and theme. Because the story takes place in one place, in the house of Mrs. Mullard, in an hour, and it has one theme. Okay, that's observe of unities. The characters of the story, we have the main characters who are Mrs. Louise Mullard, the protagonist, the wife, who has the heart problem. She has a heart condition, and Brentley Mullard, her husband, okay, the husband of Mrs. Mullard, who appears at the end of the story. Then Josephine, her sister, Mrs. Louise's sister. Mrs. Louise's sister. Then Richard, who was the friend. Doctors who came at the end of the story and decides that Mrs. Louise Mullard died of joy, or joy killed her. Theme here is very important. Theme here discusses major theme, two major themes, a theme of oppression and a theme of repression. A theme of oppression اللي هو theme of اللي هو فكرة الظلم والاضطهاد, being oppressed, يعني living under oppression by other people, or by other let's say object or factor or power. This could be someone who is oppressed, a wife oppressed by her husband, or a man oppressed by another man, or a servant oppressed by his master, or could be a husband oppressed by his wife. Maybe sometimes if someone has a bossy wife, oppression can be of different pictures and of different depictions. Here we talk about the oppression that was experienced by women in the early 19th century, and here being discussed by this story by Kate Chopin. Okay, so talking about women who were in the 19th century thought that just women were just to keep the house, to cook, to bear, and to rear children only, not anymore. Okay, and then repression, also talking about repression as another theme, اللي هو being under control, totally dominated or controlled by someone else, okay, or by something else, okay, اللي هو خلينا نقول زي اللي هو الكبت, okay, أو السيطرة, okay. هنا we have, of course, Mrs. Louise Mullard is being repressed, or pictured, or depicted as someone who is repressed by her husband, and when she hears that her husband died, she felt happy, and she felt that she would be free after his death, but because she was repressed by him. And that could be also some also they think that her heart condition was because of depressed and repressed life after marriage. Symbolism, we have different symbols used in the story. Here we talk about the major symbol, that is springtime. Okay, looking through the window, watching the trees and the grass and the birds, springtime, because it's a symbol. Springtime is always used as a symbol of rebirth, a new life, freedom. Okay, So exciting life, and Mrs. Mollard thinks is awaiting for her, or awaiting her, sorry, because she thinks when she heard the death of her husband, she thinks that she'll have a free life, and a free life is awaiting her. Okay, and so spring life is a symbol of rebirth and a new life. Then there is also, while watching through the window, there were patches of blue sky with and then that means sky with clouds. So clouds here also a symbol of something يعني bad is expected, because the sky is not clean. Sorry, it's not clear. It's still there are clouds in the sky. So that means the freedom, there is a hint here that the freedom is not complete, or there is something coming to spoil, or destroy this dream about freedom. And then there's also, the window itself, the open window, looking through an open window. The open window is also a symbol of freedom. Okay, it's an open window, so an open life is awaiting her. Okay, that's also another symbol. Then we have figures of speech اللي هو في عندنا paradox. Okay, revealed in half concealing. هذا half concealing موجود، هذا half concealing، هذا paradox. Okay, البارادوكس اللي هو ايش؟ having اللي هو statement a contradictory statement. هذا مر معنا في البويتري. البارادوكس اللي هي revealed اللي هو contradictory statement, or a statement that sounds silly, impossible at the surface, but in fact it's true. Okay, and if you think about it more, you'll find it true. So revealed in half concealing، هذا paradox. بعدين في عندنا storm of grief، هذا metaphor, comparison. Storm of grief, physical exhaustion that haunted the body، هذا metaphor personification. Okay, عندنا physical exhaustion haunted the body، يعني making the physical exhaustion like a person. Okay, haunt her body. Breath of rain metaphor و personification برضه. Okay, يعني breath is like rain، هذا metaphor. برضه rain is just as a person has breath. This is also personification. Okay, you can also read these different figures of speech to the end here. Then we come to the last part of the story here about the name, okay, which is also important. Here we talk about the name of the protagonist, the major character of the story, who was Louise Mallard. Okay, as you read here, just I'll simplify or summarize that the name of the wife is not mentioned till maybe the last, not from the beginning of the story. It's mentioned later in the story. Okay, and the name itself, Louise, okay, is the feminine name of the male name, Louis. As suggested here, that the lady's name Louise is taken from her husband's name Louis. So that's also indication of being repressed, oppressed, or being dominated, and acts as a follower to her husband, even in her name. And her name is also, as I said, is not mentioned at the very beginning. It is mentioned later in the story, because to also to indicate that the name of the lady, the wife, is not important, because she is minor in the society. So even her name is minor, and no need to mention it right away. Okay, there's also some foreshadowing in the story. The beginning or the opening sentence of the story foreshadows the ending. Okay, إذن هذا الforeshadowing, example of the foreshadowing. The opening sentence of the story foreshadows the end, tells about the end, suggests the end. Okay, at least Hence, Mrs. Mullard's heart condition will affect the outcome, the result of the story, the end of the story. Okay? And that's all for today. Please, if you have questions, read carefully. If you have any questions, please you contact me. And also, if you have questions about what we are, discussing, please also keep for our first live session, which is coming very soon. I hope you all understand what we have, what I've already discussed. And I have you enjoy reading this story, and see you very soon in the next lecture with a new story. Please read the story carefully. You have to read the story. Okay, the text of the story is attached to the lecture. Okay, thank you very much. See you again. Assalamu alaikum.